All right, welcome back into OGP Live on YouTube. This is an in-between the podcast episode ahead of the Thursday night game with the Washington football team. Want to take a look back, something that we probably won't do often on the podcast, where we really get into the snap counts too much. Did a bit of it last season over the course of the podcast, so obviously this time around, I think we're going to be more focused on kind of the in-game matchups, things that we're interested in keeping an eye on, and hopefully the New York Football Giants getting a win. But when you go back, there's a couple of things that stood out from Sunday's game, and from a macro micro perspective, we can kind of wonder what's going to happen in the short term, and then maybe just a few big picture things. A kind of a throwaway one is just that Brightwell got 8 snaps on the offensive side of the ball. So for a player that, as you worked your way through training camp, weren't sure exactly if he was going to maybe get, cut with the intention of making it through the practice squad or potentially keeping him, but would he even be able to see the field at all? Now, inside of this hierarchy, and obviously as Saquon gets his legs underneath him, the fact that he was on the field at all, I think is significant. Used in special teams, obviously, throughout that game. But just worth mentioning that he's there. He's giving you something, and it'll be interesting to see if you start to see him get some offensive reps and maybe a handful of touches over the coming weeks, or if it's just a matter. Once Barkley's up to full speed, then you'll go ahead and you'll see a little bit of Booker, and then obviously Penny got a handful of reps, etc. And it'll balance itself out there. As we know, the Giants want Barkley to be the bell cow back for them. But the other interesting things to me, and these are ones that I think really for the most part, if I'm looking through, this is all on the defensive side of the ball, because when we go back and look at this game, there's some Pro Football Focus grades, and obviously the eye test told you the offensive line played pretty well for them. We'll talk about it with Andy on our Thursday show as we look at that Washington matchup. Clean pocket, clean dropback 74% of the time for Daniel Jones on Sunday. So those are positives, and there's other numbers there to tell you that it's trending in the right direction. Still some concerns on the right side of the line, whether it's Solder or Pert. But from a snap count perspective, there's a couple of things here. You had some of the usual suspects playing maximum reps, 100% of the reps for middle linebacker Blake Martinez. That's what you expect from him. On the defensive front, though, you got Leonard Williams for 51 snaps, 77% of the snaps on the defensive side of the ball. Now, remember, first game of the season, a lot of reps on the field for the defense, obviously, but we know that it wasn't like they all of a sudden got overloaded in the second half of this game. Long sustained drive for the Broncos, for the Denver Broncos in this one, where you wore yourself down, right? You could have made plays earlier in the game. Didn't capitalize on some opportunities, a couple of big plays, obviously, from Logan Ryan. But by and large, this was just, death by 1,000 paper cuts for this defense, unable to really get home on any of their opportunities. So 51 snaps for him. Dexter Lawrence, 42. That's good for 64%. Candace Cooper mentioned this. You can go back and check out one of the previews. I believe it says Dexter Lawrence needs to step up videos. We'll throw that in here for you to click over to if you want to hear just kind of her, it's calling him out a little bit. Big year for Dexter Lawrence. He has progressed nicely. We like the way he looks from season 1 to season 2 and now to season 3. But at some point, he needs to be more of a dominant presence there. And while he's not a Leonard Williams type player, I do think that you'd like to see those reps be closer to one another than not. Dexter Lawrence needs to be on the field more often. He needs to be making big plays more often, impact plays more often. So something to keep an eye on is in behind them. Austin Johnson gave you 50% of the snaps at 33, and then 35% for Danny Shelton. So you understand that mechanism there. When you're looking at run defense, you want to go ahead and stuff that. Then you got the big boy Danny Shelton to bring in, and then Austin Johnson effectively takes over that role from B.J. Hill from last season, which we kind of anticipated. We saw some of Johnson last season. You get a little bit more of him now. And that's a keep an eye on it kind of thing. Those numbers aren't surprising, but it is probably nice to look at it and say Austin Johnson and Danny Shelton have very defined roles. It's just about rotating them in and using them effectively throughout. Then we get into the linebacking core, and there's a couple of things here. I'll I'll start with the sad point that Carter Coughlin only gets, 6 reps in this one. That was unfortunate to me because what we saw in preseason looked like he was showing some versatility. Then remember, they moved him from outside to inside linebacker. Thought that there'd be a chance there with Blake Martinez, and you have Tay Crowder, and you know why Reggie Ragland was brought into this group. So you'd like to think that there'd be some opportunities for reps there, and there just wasn't. So on the one hand, just from a bird's eye view, you say some very defined roles for this defensive unit, and on the other, because of the struggles this defense had, you'll start to wonder here, especially on Thursday night after all of these reps in a short turnaround. What, and this is overall, right? What were the Giants? What was Patrick Graham maybe trying to accomplish in this game, knowing you had a short week? First couple of games of the season, not normal preseason as we know, or the new norm, which doesn't have a lot of reps in game for these players. Maybe saving a couple of bodies to use more frequently down the line here as we get into Thursday night, and then you'll have that long layoff. So probably week 3, we can look at all these numbers again and get a stronger sense of where everyone is. But not a lot of Coughlin out there. So that's sadness for me. Also changed his number, by the way. So that threw me off for a minute. He's playing as 52 now, was 49. So some late game number changes for Joe Judge and the Giants as well. But as I mentioned at the top, Blake Martinez plays 100% of the snaps. You expect that. Tay Crowder and Reggie Ragland effectively gave you 38% apiece, 25 snaps each. So they are splitting the time alongside Blake Martinez based on run or pass and the looks that you want to provide under Patrick Graham. Now, the nice thing is, go back to last year in 2020 for Tay Crowder, he played 36% of the defensive snaps as a rookie. So even though we've seen the turnover, we think that this defense has gotten stronger, brought in different pieces, the draft, etc. Tay Crowder has entrenched himself there. So, maybe I do want to see more Carter Coughlin, but the fact that Tay Crowder got that split there tells you that he certainly has a very defined role on this team. Now, will that morph or flex a little bit as we move along? We'll have to see, because again, sample size on Sunday tells you not the most effective. The concern that I have here is that Reggie Ragland, I mean, he's a big boy, right? And you saw these opportunities when Teddy Bridgewater did drop back and when the pressure did not get there and they went with a pass. All of a sudden, when you have Blake Martinez and Reggie Ragland out there, it's going to be a difficult task, right? You saw that touchdown play that went to the tight end there where Blake Martinez tries to get out to him, goes for the tackle, just can't quite get there. And Blake Martinez isn't a slow linebacker by any stretch of the imagination, but we know that's run defense first. Pass defense is the secondary thing that he's going to be doing. So whoever's out there on the field alongside of him needs to be the more effective of the two, needs to be able to range sideline to sideline. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves over the course of the season, because we talked about this, I think, on the last episode, looking at that Cowboys game from the opening night of the season, and how a lot of the takeaways were from the media or national narrative and a lot of ex-football players was, you may think they have a lot of weapons and they have some athleticism, and that's great, but they're very much signaling based on the combos that they put out there what type of defensive scheme they're going to run. When it's against the pass, when it's against the run, that's when they're going to try to use a little bit more of Mekhi Parsons. Then you're going to bring in a little bit of Vander Esch, and you're going to blend these together, but it very much signals to the offense, well, this is the look that they're in. So every time that you get Blake Martinez and Reggie Ragland out there on the field together, you're going to say, if the opportunity presents itself, let's try to call to a pass play here, because chances are it's going to be much more likely we get a completion and much more difficult for this defense to start defending weapons in space. So, they lose Jerry Jeudy in this game with that ankle injury. We hope he's all right long term, but this wasn't a absolutely explosive offensive team in the Denver Broncos. Think about when they take on the Atlanta Falcons, who had a bad start to their season in week 3. Think about when they play the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like, then think about this upcoming week. Even if it's going to be Heineke under center, they still have Gibson there. They know we have McLaurin there. They suffered some injuries as well. They have some quality tight end weapons. Like, there's weapons on all these teams. This is true about most teams in the NFL. How are the Giants going to match up against that? And we dovetail off of it, because included in the Tay Crowder and the Reggie Ragland reps, I'm going to go ahead and when we look down at the Jabrill Peppers rep count here, there's some very telling things there and the way in which they tried to utilize him, especially later on in the game against the Broncos. But before we get there, the other big positive to me is, now you can take it with a grain of salt because they didn't get home on a lot of this, but Lorenzo Carter played 88% of the snaps on Sunday. He's entrenched, right? He is the starter. That's the highest rep count that you get on the defensive side of the ball there, inside of the linebacking group there. after Blake Martinez. So Lorenzo Carter is there. And I thought, listen, I know he didn't get home on them, but there were some really effective reps for him on Sunday. Looking forward to seeing him again here on Thursday night and how he looks. On the other side, you had Azeez Ojulari, rookie, and we know, right, had the penalty in this one. Not great. Didn't quite get home on Bridgewater a couple of times. Rookie, gonna have those growing pains. But he played 52% of the snaps, 34 total, over the 29 reps for Oshane Ximines. And what this tells me, or what we like to think it tells me, and we'll try to get confirmation as we go forward, is that Oshane Ximines is already now potentially going to be behind Azeez Ojulari, right? The Giants want Azeez to step in and be the starter. And when your rep counts start like this, after we heard that Oshane looked solid in camp, had come back from the injury, was going to be more effective. We think we like him in this group, but the hierarchy now goes Lorenzo Carter entrenched, Azeez on the other side, and then Oshane Ximines is going to have to work those reps. What you'd love to see, because it means that the quality of the play dictates it, is that Azeez Ojulari continues to grow in his rep count as the season moves along, and then you get to use Oshane Ximines in relief. So I want to see the number grow for Azeez from 52% to 65%. Maybe not on Thursday night, because again, the short turnaround. And obviously, he's a rookie getting his legs underneath him. But by the middle of this season, you'd really like to see Lorenzo Carter and Azeez Ojulari getting the bulk of the reps on those outside linebacker positions, because it just means that you're checking that box. They are the best, most effective weapon. These by-committee rotations are the things that better teams get further and further away from, even though we know on a scheme basis, down in distance, you're going to want to be able to rotate and give different looks. But what you want is players that can do both, right? Players that can be alongside Blake Martinez. You'd like it if Tay Crowder or Reggie Ragland could do both fairly effectively, so you could keep them on the field together more often than not. And then, if I had to pick my poison, I'd say I want more Tay Crowder out there and Reggie Ragland to come in and be the thumper against the run, really thinking about using him in conjunction with a Danny Shelton. Now, all of a sudden, it's the big bodies. Now you're really trying to shut down that run early in games and then force the opposition into some of those passing looks, allow yourself to get into your prime packages, one-on-one, man-to-man coverage on the outside, and then hopefully get home on some of these blitz packages and the one-on-one assignments, right? Again, Candace Cooper, Dexter Lawrence, got to beat your man. If Leonard Williams is going to get the double team, you need to get through and get home, or at least open up the opportunity for a linebacker in behind, or Austin Johnson potentially give him that one-on-one assignment at the front as well. So those are the things that I'm looking at, and I like it as far as we drafted Azeez. We want to see him come on, right? The last piece, so I mentioned Peppers. The couple of things here is when you go all the way back to the safeties, and I go to them because when you look at the cornerback room, especially without Aaron Robinson on the field yet for them, it's Darnay Holmes who's getting that third set of reps at the slot. You have, obviously, Bradbury. You have Adoree Jackson. There's not a lot to learn there just yet. Nothing else. No Sam Beal reps. Surprise, surprise. But none of those reps came through. So we'll wait to see as that unit gets stronger and healthier. Julian Love had just about 20% of the rep count there. So, we feel like that's going to be the evolution there of the position. Here's why I find it interesting, though. Xavier McKinney, 95% of the reps, 63 snaps on Sunday. Logan Ryan, 92% of the snaps, 61 snaps on the day on Sunday at the safety positions. Now, you may be saying, okay, fine. So Jabrill Peppers, well, you're splitting time though, right? Because I'd like to bring him down to the box and be effective in that way as well. 45% of the reps, just 30 snaps for Jabrill Peppers. And when you think about the back end of that game, when they were asking him essentially because you couldn't necessarily depend in those run looks, or when you had Ragland and Blake Martinez on the field, you need Jabrill Peppers to come down, pick up the tight ends. He was trailing them in a number of plays because that's still a difficult assignment for him. You'd like to think that he can stay with them, but Noah Fant's athletic and big. Get that body in between the defender and the quarterback, makes the completions pretty easy. And we saw a bit of that. So the reason why it's interesting to think about, we'll go micro, macro. On the micro, Jabrill Peppers played 83% of snaps in 2020. So, he was a stalwart there, right? Now, we can say, again, confirming this information on Thursday night and then on the following game against the Falcons about where these percentages go. This can be scheme dependent. You can be thinking, what did Patrick Graham want to accomplish in this game? Try to force certain looks or certain issues. But if that was the case, Jabrill Peppers would make even more sense to get higher rep counts because he's the guy that comes down in support against the run as well. So if you're going to say it's Teddy Bridgewater, a game manager, and we're less worried about the coverage end of things so much as we are about shutting down one phase of the game, the running attack, and then saying we think that we can, make plays in our secondary, in our coverage with the personnel that we have. So that would make me think you want more Jabrill Peppers. So the fact that that's a lower on the micro says, on the positive side of it, that Xavier McKinney is certainly growing as he gets into year number 2 fully healthy after starting out injured last season in his rookie campaign. And then that Logan Ryan, right, named a captain, obviously. So he's coming on strong. He has a very defined role, made the big play with the strip fumble recovery, almost had a second one in this game as well. And then on the macro level, remember, everyone said about, well, what's going to happen in the offseason? What about we need to pay certain players? Jabrill Peppers is one of them. I keep your eyes on it, right? Because what you can afford to do here, and if you want to hear it, this is off-season talk, but you can afford to move on from Jabrill Peppers. You'll have Xavier McKinney and Logan Ryan for another season. You can draft in another player, see how maybe Julian Love develops potentially as a replacement for Jabrill Peppers. I'm not leaning hard into that. But you'll have another season with Xavier McKinney and Logan Ryan before you need to think about what the next phase of the back end of that defense is going to be. So just something to think about. I'm not saying that you're only going to get 45% of reps on a consistent basis from Jabrill Peppers. I'm not saying I don't love Jabrill Peppers. I'm not saying he's not going to make big plays this season. But it is interesting that the hierarchy very much was a 1-2 punch between McKinney and Ryan. And then effectively, Jabrill Peppers is finding his shares by surrendering 20% of the snaps, 18% to Julian Love. Then you're also trying to mix in a little bit kind of at that linebacker safety kind of role, dropping down into the box and then picking up players in coverage. But if you can't be as effective as the Giants may need you to be picking up the tight ends, then all of a sudden you become a little bit more limited. Now, certainly, Peppers picking up a tight end in coverage is a more favorable matchup than Blake Martinez or a Reggie Ragland. But how much is the difference between him picking him up versus Tay Crowder dropping into that coverage and trying to pick up a tight end in those looks? So these are the things that we'll suss out over the course of the remainder of the season. But that was the big takeaway for me, that we're starting to maybe see that transition of power to Xavier McKinney as we assumed it would be. And we know that he's a versatile player and can be used in a lot of different ways. So in a game where the Giants were not terribly effective on defense, obviously they didn't get home on some of the looks. Again, you heard our reaction, Andy and myself, about where this game was and how we felt about it. And then you try to take that deep breath, right? You thought you were going to kind of be able to play this soft coverage defense, keep everything in front of you. You thought that the offense was going to be more effective. They weren't able to run the ball very well. They weren't able to get some of the looks that they wanted. Obviously, Daniel Jones has that big fumble. So there's just a lot of little moments here where the Giants game gets away from them on Sunday. Unfortunately, window dressing touchdown at the back end of the fourth quarter there in the waning seconds from Daniel Jones, 27-13. Effectively, though, this was a 27-7 game. It's just not good enough, right? Now, and it goes on both sides, though. You can't play in the National Football League in today's NFL and be scoring 7 points effectively, right? It's not good enough. Also, you can't be a team that poured this kind of money into that side of the ball and surrender 27 points to Teddy Bridgewater and the Denver Broncos offense. It's unacceptable. So these are the things we want to see get cleaned up. Again, if you want to take kind of the Patriots, Bill Belichick approach where he says, hey, first 4 weeks of the season really aren't make or break for us. That's when we figure things out, when we fine tune, and then you go from there. Giants don't have the track record to be able to say that, but I do want to give some level of wiggle room here where we say, let's get a look at where these reps go on Thursday night. Let's see how effective the defense is. What does Patrick Graham do to switch things up a little bit? But it does beg the question, and we mentioned this a little bit on the last episode, which you can go check out wherever you get your podcast needs fulfilled. You do wonder, going back to the draft, because I actually just watched, you'll see this on what'll be on Tuesday, but the Monday night game there, you saw Owe for the Baltimore Ravens, and he had up and down. He's a rookie player, but he was effective, though. He was chasing down the quarterback on a number of plays, and this goes back to that thing that we discussed about. You make the trade back. You saw that Slater played very effectively in his rookie debut as well. So you think about, could you have stayed at the top of the draft there and taken an offensive lineman to strengthen this offensive line? When you look out the right side, you start to wonder. And then even after you make the trade back, this has nothing to do with Kadarius Toney, who only had 4 or 5 reps in this game. They said they were going to be purposeful, I believe, is the term that they used as far as when they brought him on and how they used him. So I'm not judging Kadarius Toney, but I am judging about when you're there at 20, the decision you make and who you decide to take after having picked up Kenny Golladay in free agency and after having signed Adoree Jackson in free agency. You start to look around and you say, well, where are still the holes on this team getting after the quarterback, right? So we had mentioned Tryon, we had mentioned Owe, mentioned a lot of these names that could have been helpful to bring into that defensive side of the ball that was already a strength. But you have to wonder. You just have to wonder about the decision making here. And when we think about that idea of saying, well, the goal is to confirm or deny what Daniel Jones is, okay. But if you can't confirm, you saw how good Sterling Shepard looks, right? If you can't confirm or deny this season what Daniel Jones is with Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, assuming he comes back, Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, Kyle Rudolph, Saquon Barkley, right? Like you already had a really nice collection of weapons. And even if you're going to tell me that Kadarius Toney is the next coming of OBJ, you just have to wonder about constructing a balanced roster. And that's what we're going to watch here on the snap count. We may see Toney get out there on the field more on Thursday night, give this, new dynamic layer to the offense that helps them move the ball more effectively, opens things up in both the running and passing game, makes Daniel Jones look better, makes his game easier to flow into, little checkdowns, end around sweeps that go for big yardage, right? So we'll wait and see. But it's just interesting to think about some of the other players, the rookie talents that we've seen around the league, and then the areas in which the Giants struggled a little bit on Sunday and may struggle over the course of this season, and saying, how do we make sure that we're balanced in all phases of the game, not just making positions that are strong even stronger, and maybe pushing off in some regards areas of weakness that we know we need to address. That will, however, my friends, do it for the snap count breakdown. That will do it for the snap count breakdown for Big Blue Week 1. We will come right back in next week. We're going to do this exclusively on YouTube. So we'll always have this kind of compare and contrast from the week prior. We'll combine it with a little bit of PFF grades and see how, as rep counts increased, what did it mean for the players' production and how they grade out on the back end of it on a week-to-week basis. So hopefully something interesting that everyone can get in on. Give me your comments and perspectives around what you think you'll see on Thursday, guys whose reps could drop, players you want to see rise there. I honestly, I want to see more Carter Coughlin. Obviously, he's my boy, but I just think that there's a value there in creating some different dynamic looks for the opposition. And it will be a division game, obviously, come Thursday night. Be sure to check out Andy and myself. The Thursday episode will be up bright and early Thursday morning, looking at that Washington matchup, talking about some of the big key playmakers that we want to see step up in a big way as the Giants try to right their ship very early in the season. But nobody wants to go 0-2. Nobody wants to give this fan base further heart palpitations as we start to wonder, are we on the right track or moving in the direction of a crumbling pseudo empire that once was? You can, of course, subscribe here on YouTube, rate, review, and follow the podcast wherever you get those needs fulfilled. And as Andy Makowitz would want you, the New York Football Giants fans, to know, as always, let's go Big Blue.